Rand the first question.
Okay, well, we should introduce ourselves, no?
Okay, Mark is a partner. Are you a senior partner yet, Mark?
Way to go.
Okay. At KM, it's the second largest. Still, is it the first largest now? Or it's still the second.
It's the first one. It's now definitely number one in China
Okay, so he's with the number
and in
one
Hong Kong.
in
Yeah.
China. I've known Mark for quite a few years. He's got a degree, a law degree in China, and then went to University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana for a master's in intellectual property law. And he was the architect of a very successful anti-counterfeiting program in China on behalf of one of the companies we worked for. Rand, as I did a short introduction, I'll let him do the rest of the introduction.
Okay. Well, thanks, Robert. Mark, a pleasure to meet you. I know we're all here today to talk about exporting and China and intellectual property and licensing. And so I think it's going to be an engaging conversation. So as Bob said, Rand Brenner, my company's licensing consulting group. My focus is on working with companies to manage their licensing campaign. We don't do any of the legal work. We leave that to folks like Mark to take care of that. We do the business development side of it. So we work a lot with medical device companies, both in the US and outside the US, as well as other types of IP, including formulations, content, entertainment, consumer products, consumer services, you name it, it goes across the board. Even AI and some NFTs have come into the fold lately as part of that process. And so what we do is we manage everything from the strategy and planning all the way through outreach, negotiations, and compliance. And we've been doing that for over 35 years.
Wow.
So, and today we're looking forward to a conversation. It's always good to be able to share insight on different markets and legal issues around the world as it relates to IP and what those opportunities are. So pleased to be here.
Okay, thank you. You get the first question, Rand.
The first question. Well, Mark, why don't you give us a little more introduction about you and your law firm so the folks watching can get a little more sense about what you can potentially offer them if they set their sights on China.
Yeah, sure. Where should I start? I'm now a partner in Ken Root Medicines. I don't know if you have heard about the firm, but it's the number one firm in China, not only in IP, but also it's a full service law firm. We get around 3,000 people working within the law firm, and the IP practice. Within the IP practice, we have like more than 500 people. So personally, I am in the IP transaction team. So what I do is mostly the IT licensing work. When I was working with Bob, I did the full IP package, including but mostly the enforcement work. We also do quite some prosecution work. For example, the trademark prosecutions and some design patents, validations, etc. But now, and my I would say more than 60 or 70 my work is about the licensing, is about the transaction, and about the collaboration to creation of the IP. And I also do quite small bit of work in the enforcement, litigation, and the other prosecution work. So that's pretty much about me. And as Bob mentioned, we have been, knowing each other for quite a while, and we work, quite a lot in the IP field around, I would say, more than 10 years ago already. And back then, I was working on the anti-counterfeit. So I worked, under Bob's supervision, helping the U.S. companies and a U.S. company with respect to their, anti-counterfeit effort in China. And after that, I joined another company where I
You went mute, Mark.
Uh-oh. We got muted.
Hello?
Now
There
you're
you go.
Yeah,
Uh,
there was a call coming in, and probably the very last section of my conversation was just blocked by that call. But never mind.
okay. And hey, Bob, why don't we go back to you for a moment? And talk about, you've known Mark for a long time, you on the enforcement side, but you got an extensive background in the consumer products field, and especially working outside the United States and Latin America. And why don't you share some of that? Because I think it can be very insightful in terms of what we'll be discussing today.
okay. I've worked for various companies in the that sell to retail. I worked in the international division the whole time. Uh, the I worked in Asia. I worked in Europe. I worked in Africa. I was very successful in Nigeria. The We didn't lose a single penny while I was there, and we had $1 million business.
What were you doing? What was your role, and who did you work
My
for?
role was in sales, and I worked for Wall Clipper Corporation. Most of my career in international was with Wall Clipper in two different stints. I also worked in Mexico, setting up a joint venture for the company I worked with. Uh, Worked with a company in Mexico. In 3 years, me and my team took the sales from 4 million to 26 million with an advertising spend of 500,000. So I know the buyers in most of the world's retailers. Some of them may not be there now. I've been doing this for over 30 years. Uh, but I think the my experience has been in sales, in a little bit of finance in when we were setting up the joint venture, and in brand protection, anti-counterfeiting,
Which is where you met Mark.
where I met
Yeah.
Mark.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's a big subject. So, Mark, jumping back over to you, in working with clients and licensing, the questions about China always come up. How do we get into the market? What should we, what are the issues there? And of course, piracy jumps to the top of the list. So, as companies, IP owners look at, the Chinese market and they're interested in doing licensing over there. Obviously, the importance of working with somebody like you. Can you take us through, some of the things that, companies outside of China who are interested in getting there, especially through licensing, need to be aware of or take steps with, or even in fact, engage a firm such as yours to help manage that process and also monitor and make sure everything is going as it should?
Let me bring in one point. If people listening are thinking, oh boy, here we're going to be talking about licensing products. Licensing, as Rand has explained to me, is an excellent way for a US company that has IP to get into the Chinese market with very little risk. And if you're manufacturing in China already, it's just one step closer to doing it. So go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's all right.
Exactly. I think licensing IP is not as risky as many of the international companies has been thinking about. But the key is to have a plan, have a good plan. Always, get your IP registered in China before even before you step into the China market. China as it's the same as the other jurisdictions. It adopt the strict first to file policy, which means basically whoever first to file in China get the IP registered and protected. So we have seen, too many, I would say, dramas or tragedies whereby the companies forgot to do it for whatever reason, and they have to spend even millions of dollars to get it cured, and the consequence can be quite unfortunate. And also, it depends on the industry, but for the for the good for the big brand with big name or the famous names, it depends on the trademark protection. And for example, some tech firms like the medical device companies, they get patents registered and also the know-how. And one of the key is with respect to the key employees, because the know-how and trade secret actually they are within people's head. And now we are seeing many Chinese talented executives being moving between the MNC to the local startups. And with that move, there are quite some trade secrets being I would say being released. So that's also something you should take care of. But basically, for the newcomers into the market, I would always suggest them to do the priority as registering their IP.
Okay. And then obviously working with somebody such as yourself to make sure that it's done correctly and that it's covered, and they've got somebody there representing their IP and making sure that if there is any issues, you're there that can take care of it for them. And we'll provide contact information at the end of this video.
Yeah.
So this leads to the next question. And Bob, I'll throw this one over to you. So there's companies, outside of China, they have licensed in technologies, and they're interested in going into the Chinese market. So there's a couple of things that are challenging to them. And I think the first point relates to this: how do they get it into the Chinese market from a export-import standpoint? Because it's a big market, and I'm sure there's a lot of regulations there, and that's where somebody like such as yourself can help them navigate that.
Well, there's first of all, the standards. As I like to tell people, the U.S. has lawsuits. The rest of the world has product standards. It's what keeps the manufacturing. A good example is UL, but there's a UL government agency in most every country. So you have to ask about the standards. You have to ask about the tariffs. You have to ask about the duties. You have to ask about the freight. But first of all, probably the most interesting advice Mark ever gave me was to tell the company I was working for to make sure that their suppliers, the contract with the suppliers, had the Chinese name of the company. Because they could pick any English name and put it down on paper. And when you go back to, if you have any problems, you're not dealing with an actual event. So that's the thing to do. It's simple, but most people don't think about it because they're not reading Chinese. The other thing I suggest is that as you're entering the market, you're going to have a whole lot of legal work, and you're going to have lawyers in the U.S. They may recommend lawyers in China. I recommend Mark's law firm because it's the largest. And say, for instance, and I don't know well, I'm sure Mark and his partners do it. Say, for instance, you have a product that you want to license in China, that one of their companies, one of their clients would be interested. I'm sure they'll set up the contact for you. The other thing is, even if you have a U.S. attorney, make sure you're communicating with the Chinese attorney and not just getting translations from your U.S. attorney. Make sure the Chinese attorney understands the U.S. law. Mark, with a master's degree from University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, understands completely what happened, what the law is here. So then, I think, and while you guys were talking, I came up with a question of my own. If China is a first file country, do people look at the filings in the U.S.? Do people in China look at the filings in the U.S. to copy those filings in China before the companies have a chance to register in the U.S., or is there some kind of a grace period to register?
That's a good one. Yeah, actually, that has been happening for many years. In China, there is a bunch of people. We call them trademark scorer. So they score on the brand that has not yet entered into China. What do they look like? Or what do they look at? Basically, one of the things they are looking at is the foreign register or foreign filings. So that's something definitely they are looking at. And now actually the same thing has been happening with more and more Chinese company going out of China. What they are doing is they look at the jurisdictions that are popular for the Chinese clients, and they go there and do the registration. So it's just they are doing the same thing years ago, just in the reverse reverse way. So basically, yes, they do. And with respect to that, the law has basically it really depends on the jurisdictions, but basically there is a 6 months priority for the trademark filing internationally, which means basically if you have filed a trademark in one jurisdiction and according to some treaties, you get the priority to register that within 6 months in another jurisdiction. And you can claim the day you have been doing it in your home country as a priority day. So that's something can benefit. But again, not everyone knows this, and not everyone has seized the 6 months priority period.
Okay, if you have a say for instance you have a trademark uh, and you want to register, you had the trademark for years, but you want to register it in China. Uh, you would want to register both the English and Chinese version of that trademark, wouldn't you?
Exactly. Because although China is getting more and more international, most of the Chinese, the Chinese consumers, the Chinese readers, audience, they recognize the foreign brand by their Chinese translation. And that's why and for many international brand, if they do not have a very good local marketing team, they probably wouldn't do the translation very good. Or we have seen many international brands who has more than one Chinese name. So
Mhm.
that can be problematic, as you can imagine. Some consumers recognize the brand in this way, and the other, a couple brand, a couple of names can be recognized by another couple of consumers. So as long as you haven't registered all the names, it can be problematic. So it really I think it's really the marketing team's jobs to unify or to choose one good sound brand name and do the registration as soon as possible.
Mhm.
Good points. Mark, I have a question for you then. Can you speak a bit about the patent side of the IP issue? Is it similar? Are they looking for patents filed in the US and then trying to duplicate that in China? What are some of the things that IP owners outside of China need to think about as it relates to patents and going into China with those patents?
Patents is a little bit different than trademarks, because for the patents, it has to be new before it can be registered or it can be granted for registration. And for the patents, it has a similar concept as a priority, but that can be longer. So there are
Okay.
basically two ways. Yeah, for example, if a U.S. company who has filed a U.S. Patent in the home country, there are two approaches. Basically, it can choose to enter into China. First one would be the Paris Convention, which means it has basically 1 year or 12 months prior period, so that it can file the same using the same earlier priority date to enter into China. So that's approach number one. And approach number two would be more popular or more commonly seen, which is the PCT patent application.
Right.
So you file through the PCT represent the Patent Cooperation Treaty, which is basically a treaty among multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries, with respect to the filing of the patent across different countries. So using the PCT, you have around 30 months priority period, which is longer, but it's a little bit more expensive. Still, it's worth of trying for a multinational company. So basically, if you want to enter into China, you have to register your patent in China. Either 12 months or 30 months after you have filed your home country patent application. After that
Okay.
period of time expires, you have no chance to register it. So that's
Okay.
the problematic one. But as long as you have filed the patent in your home country, no one else can squat on the same patent. So that's different from trademark.
So are you saying even if they didn't register the patent in China, the fact that it's been issued in the United States would prevent them from doing, like you said, something similar to trademark? They just can't squat on it and say, hey, we've got this in China, because I guess it already exists prior in the home country. So I guess
Exactly.
that offers a little
E-
consolation, I guess, if they miss the deadline, but I'm sure you can help them sort that out if that's the situation.
Exactly.
So
That's what I mean by saying that patents have to be new or novel before they can be issued. So that's different
right.
from trademarks.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a lot more complex and a bit more expensive, but it nevertheless is important, especially in a lot of industries such as medical devices. So I have another question. This goes to both of you, and it relates to working with a number of IP owners who have created their IP, their patented product, their technology, primarily in a tangible form that needs to get produced. And so production is usually looked at in China. So, the challenges for a number of these companies is getting themselves set up to be able to manufacture in China, and who are the reputable companies to work with, and what do they need to think about in terms of keeping control of their IP, working with Chinese manufacturers in terms of if they have know-how or whatever it is. And then, of course, what do they need to do to get the products out of China and into a market such as the US?
Bob, you want to take this?
Okay, working with a Chinese company on licensing for a product probably means that you're not producing the product, or maybe you are producing the product in China. You have to be sure that you're working with a reputable person, whether they're producing or you're giving them licensing. You have to be sure that they have, some type of stability. Maybe an internationally audited financial statement would be great. A lot of people, you're at a trade show, people come up and say, "Oh, I can manufacture this product for you," and
Right.
they're 10 steps away from a manufacturer. If you're looking for manufacturing of a product without having a market in the US, then you're looking at a very different situation. And that's where you want someone like Mark checking out these companies that you're going to give your intellectual property to manufacture. Bringing it out of China, it's the same thing. You're going to you want to look at the duty rates, you want to look at the tariffs, you want to look at the freight, and you want to look at the lead time. Lead time is really important when you're looking at China, because there's so many, there's so many ships going out of the Ningbo port, for instance, that, it might take you 2 weeks just to get on a ship to be shipped out. So that's one of the things you want to look at. A strategy. You want to make sure that if you want to give this manufacturer your license for China, the product stays in China, that he doesn't sell it to exporters that can then move into your markets where you're already selling your product. So those are things that you won't, if you run in with the right company, you won't run into those problems. And when I was doing all the work in China, I noticed that all the big companies that you wouldn't have any problem with were being acquired by European and American companies. So, the thing is, it's always, know your partner and know your partner well. You can continue on that, Mark.
Yeah, I think Bob has given quite some very valuable advice from the commercial perspective. From legal perspective, I would say 2 points. First one is to have a good contract. Many
Sure.
people would contract with their Chinese supplier using the same form as they are using in the other countries, but that cannot. Sometimes that can not be sufficient. So China gets many China specific rules, and just to give you one example, for example, the governing law and the dispute resolution in the contract. I have seen many companies using, for example, the New York law and New York court to as a governing law and the jurisdiction for disputes, and they don't know a judgment made by the New York court is not enforceable in China. So basically, you have formulated a very fancy contract that is not enforceable. So that's some that's a tragedy that we wouldn't want to see. That's number one, and number two is with respect to the technology companies. If you are handing over the technology to the Chinese suppliers or OEM manufacturers for manufacturing, just get it protected as much as possible. By saying get it protected, it means you probably need to file the patents. If that's something that you cannot file, then just hand over as little as possible. You can use, for example, some black box to to protect the insider information or layout. You can you don't have to disclose everything before you can get the manufacture work done.
Okay, good
So
point.
that's the best I can tell you about the protection of the IP or the trade secrets. The less you hand over, the safer you are.
Sure.
Mark,
Well,
let me
go ahead.
Mark, you mentioned previously. I remember back when our product was being sold everywhere as counterfeit products being manufactured. And when you looked at the factories that were making them, they were ex-employees that were in charge of those factories. So those employees found out the technology, they started using it, and they figured out they could go out on their own. One interesting thing and this again, Mark told me about, it was amazing. It really helped protect our products. Mark, explain the design patent, which is different than what they do in the US.
Uh, yeah, in China, designs are protected as one of the categories for patents. So basically, you have to file the design patent before you can get protected. And once you file it, you can use it and attack others as a patent infringement claim. So basically, for example, whatever device, or for example, the medical device, for the medical device, if it has some shapes or patterns which are on the appearance of the devices, and you want to get it protected, usually you do not file trademarks because these are not as distinctive as the logos or the names itself. But these appearance are something also important. It's the design language, or it shows who is who. And that's something that you can file for the design patent, and that works a lot. And you can even use it, with the Chinese customs before the OEM manufacturers can export these products with registered design art. The customer officials can help to inspect these infringing products and seize them so that they can be prohibited from outporting out of China.
Oh, interesting
Mark was,
strategy.
let me
So,
say one thing. Mark was instrumental in setting up a program with the Chinese customs. And when the Chinese customs people met with the U.S. customs people, they said, listen, if you want a program that works, follow this program. And it was Mark's program they were pointing out.
oh, interesting stuff. So, Mark, on the design patent, is a design patent in China? Is it a different process as opposed to utility? Is it easier to get, more expensive? I mean, it sounds like it could be a good strategic move for a company. So, how does a design patent sit relative to a utility patent as far as what's required to get it done?
Definitely easier, but by utility patent, I have to say that in China, actually, there are three types of patents: uh, the invention patent, the utility model patent, and the design patent. So the Chinese invention patent equals to the utility patent in the US.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and the
So the
utility model patent, the category number one utility model patent, they are more categorized as the small inventions. So they are not that substantial creations. They are more like the structures and some something about the shapes, etc. And
okay.
the design patent is purely about the design.
And you can, with a design package, with this design patent, you can do packaging also.
Exactly. You
So if
can
you
do the
have a certain package,
patenting. You can protect the outer appearance, the design, and as long as these designs are feasible for the for productions.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting strategy. Well, that's something then that a number of IP owners should give serious consideration, businesses to, is understanding. I mean, when and speaking with a lot of uh, clients, potential clients, we talk about patents, and in many cases, they don't necessarily have a thought out strategy route for patents. It's one of these things where, okay, we've invented this, let's just go get a patent. And then they move on to China and say, let's get a utility patent and things like that. So it's not really thought out. And from what we're discussing here, it sounds like if looking at the different types or levels of patents in China would be worth considering, because there could be a way of strategizing a better, I guess, patent configuration to help, protect the rights in China, as opposed to just going straight ahead with utility and not really giving a second thought to other ways that might be more effective in China. So,
Exactly. Always give a second thought before you go ahead with registration, especially for some U.S. companies that are not that familiar with the Chinese market. What
right,
we usually say is that they just ask their U.S. Lawyer
right.
to file the counterpart patent in China, and they wouldn't discuss too much about what types and what's the strategy.
Very important. Yeah. And I've talked about that a lot. So this is good stuff. For those viewing, they really need to understand it's more than just taking what you created in the US and going to China with it and registering it. There's more that can be done. So, and bringing this full circle, we've been talking about, the legal side, the import export, and obviously the licensing side. So I think, one of the things that we'd like to, I guess, reiterate with folks is that, when you're looking at China, you really need that expertise help. And it's more than just going out, finding your own, supplier or manufacturer. It really does pay to invest and retain folks such as Bob and Mark to help you do that, not only on the product development side and the manufacturing, but also on what's required to get it out of China into the US or vice versa. So I think that, this is an opportunity for anyone watching to really explore, the professional expertise of between the three of us. And, we'll have our contact information there so you can reach out and really find out, ask a few questions and see, what some of the big benefits would be in looking at making that investment in the services to help, you know, manage the process properly, get it done correctly, and avoid, as you said, Mark, the really expensive part of having to come back around to try to fix everything. And I can relate just a little bit of a story, and I'm going to have companies approach me or IP owners approach me, and they've already got into some litigation problems, and they're saying we want to look at licensing now. At that stage, I can't help them because they're in the litigation stage, and it's something that has to get resolved by legal experts, and attempting to license an IP that's under this litigation process is very difficult, if not impossible. I mean, nobody wants to get involved in the litigation. It can spill over. So I think that kind of talks to this idea of making the investment up front with the proper professional expertise can help save a lot of headaches and down the road, especially when it comes to a huge and somewhat complex market such as China. So any closing comments on other thoughts folks should keep in mind when dealing with exporting in China or importing in China?
Well, first of all, China's a huge market, and every year it's getting more people with disposable income. I know you have a lot of customers with medical instruments. Well, China has this huge medical complex industry. Also, I think that working with someone like Mark gives you a inside experience of dealing with China, and he'll try to keep you out as many of the pitfalls as possible as you walk along the path.
And that goes the same for the exporting importing side. I mean, especially outside the United States, it's not simply a matter, as you said, of booking a ship and getting a container put together and sticking it in the containers and away it goes. It's become somewhat more complex. And so there's a lot of nuances that I think, Bob, with your decades of experience and know-how in doing that, really speaks to making it worthwhile for somebody interested in that aspect of the business, whether it's into China or other markets around the world, to get that insight, because it can really help as well. I mean, it's not only getting in trouble on the IP and the registration side, but it can also be getting bogged down and not quite doing the right things to get it in or out of a country, and now getting stopped at the border, paying high tariff, whatever the case is. So I think it makes it, I would encourage anybody and everybody watching this webinar, it's worth reaching out and having a short conversation with any of us to make sure that you can avoid some pitfalls that can really really run you into a brick wall and cost a lot more later on down the road.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Mark. I'd like to thank you, Rand. I think this has been very informative. One last tip I would say is trade shows. Be very careful of the people you hand out your materials to. As a matter of fact, if it was up to me, I would say take their business card, and I would say I'll send it to you via email after the show, and then I'd investigate their company and make sure they're, otherwise, you may be handing a whole catalog of products to some copier that wants to counterfeit them.
Good point. Mark, some closing remarks?
Many of the foreign investors would have some, especially the ones from the US, would have some stereotype about China, being the the theft of the IP. I have to say, with my decades of practice, I have witnessed China improving its legislation on the protection of IP. And let's be frank, China now gets its technology and brand. We have been working with, for example, the TikTok, the DeepSeek. I don't know if you are familiar. This name are familiar with you, but these are now very famous in China. And with respect to their protection of the IP, and they get influence all over the world. And the Chinese government is helping not only the foreign companies but also the Chinese companies with respect to the protection of their technologies and IP as well in the same manner. China is not only the made in China, but also created in China now. So, and the government is, definitely, putting the same level of protection to the Chinese ones as the foreign ones. So, welcome to China, as I always say. And I would say, the local protection or the law, the legal protection in China, on the ground would be, safeguarding your interest and your IP.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Well, this has been informative. And as we've talked about this, you'll see down below where this is posted, our contact information. Reach out, say hello, ask some questions. We'd love to talk to you and see if we can help guide you in the right route, whether it's getting products out or in or registered in China. Just send a note, get in touch. Look forward to talking to you. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rand.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you, Bob.